Hold on to your hats, folks, because the trade war between the United States and China just escalated from a minor squabble to a full-blown tariff tsunami. What started as a few jabs and counter-jabs has now turned into an all-out economic brawl, with both sides digging in their heels and preparing for a long, grueling fight. The stakes have never been higher, and the global economy is watching with bated breath. President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, has decided to slap a whopping 125% tariff on a vast array of Chinese goods. This aggressive move is aimed at curbing what the U.S. administration sees as unfair trade practices by China. But it's also a risky gamble that could have far-reaching consequences. This move comes as a surprise to absolutely no one who's been paying attention for the past, 3 years. The tension has been building steadily, with each side accusing the other of foul play and economic sabotage. It was only a matter of time before things reached a boiling point. Buckle up, because things are about to get bumpy. The markets are already reacting with wild swings, and businesses on both sides of the Pacific are scrambling to adjust their strategies. Consumers, too, are bracing for impact, as the cost of goods is likely to rise. The tariffs, which went into effect immediately, are designed to pressure China into making concessions on trade practices that the U.S. considers unfair. This includes everything from currency manipulation to state-sponsored cyber espionage. The goal is to level the playing field, but the path to get there is fraught with peril. These include forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and other practices that have long been a thorn in the side of American businesses. The U.S. is demanding that China play by the rules of international trade, but China has its own set of grievances and is unlikely to back down easily, and massive government subsidies to Chinese companies. These subsidies give Chinese firms an unfair advantage in the global marketplace, according to U.S. officials. The hope is that by hitting China where it hurts, in the wallet, the U.S. can force a change in behavior. Of course, whether these tactics will actually work or simply blow up in everyone's faces remains to be seen. The risk is that the trade war could spiral out of control, leading to a global economic downturn. Both sides have a lot to lose, and the stakes couldn't be higher. One thing's for sure, this is a high-stakes gamble with potentially disastrous consequences for both sides. The world is watching closely, and the outcome of this trade war could reshape the global economic landscape for years to come. So stay tuned, because this is just the opening salvo in what promises to be a long and contentious battle. So, what exactly is the official justification for this latest round of tariff-based aggression? Well, according to the man himself, it all boils down to one thing: disrespect for world markets. Yes, you heard that right. The same president who routinely flouts international norms and tears up global agreements is now deeply offended by China's lack of decorum. It's almost as if the president is completely oblivious to the irony of the situation. Or perhaps he's just banking on the fact that his supporters won't notice, or care. Either way, it's a flimsy excuse that does little to mask the true motivations behind this trade war. A toxic cocktail of economic nationalism, political posturing, and a healthy dose of good old-fashioned xenophobia. China, unsurprisingly, isn't taking this lying down. In response to the U.S. tariff hike, Beijing has vowed to take resolute and forceful measures to protect its interests. While the specifics of these measures are still being worked out, one thing is clear: China is prepared to fight fire with fire. This tit-for-tat escalation is precisely what economists and trade experts have been warning about since the beginning of this trade war. Each round of tariffs begets another, leading to a downward spiral of economic damage and uncertainty. The longer this goes on, the more difficult it will be to find a way out. The impact of this trade war is already being felt far beyond the borders of the US and China. Global markets are in turmoil, with stocks plummeting and investors bracing for the worst. The S&P 500, for example, has fallen for 4 consecutive days since the tariff announcement, wiping out trillions of dollars in market value. This volatility is a clear sign that investors are deeply concerned about the potential consequences of a prolonged trade war. The uncertainty surrounding trade policy is making it difficult for businesses to plan for the future, leading to delays in investment and hiring. This, in turn, could lead to slower economic growth, not just in the US and China, but around the world. Section 5. A united front, international reactions, and countermeasures. The United States isn't exactly winning any popularity contests with its go-it-alone approach to trade. The Trump administration's aggressive stance on tariffs and trade policies has sparked a wave of international backlash. Countries around the world are feeling the impact and are responding in kind. Unsurprisingly, many of America's closest allies are less than thrilled about being caught in the crossfire of this trade war. The ripple effects are being felt far and wide, causing economic uncertainty and political tension. Canada, for example, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting key industries and products. This move is a direct response to the tariffs imposed by the United States, and it highlights the growing strain in U.S.-Canada relations. Meanwhile, the European Union is considering similar measures. European leaders are weighing their options and preparing to defend their economic interests. The EU's potential countermeasures could escalate the trade conflict even further. Even South Korea, which relies heavily on the United States for security, has not remained silent. The South Korean government has voiced its displeasure and is taking steps to protect its own industries. In a significant move, South Korea announced billions of dollars in support for its auto industry, a clear shot across the bow of the American automotive sector. This is a strategic effort to bolster their own economy in the face of U.S. tariffs. The American automotive sector is feeling the pressure as these international countermeasures take effect. The industry is bracing for the impact of these retaliatory actions. This growing chorus of international condemnation should be a wake-up call for the Trump administration. The global community is united in its opposition to the U.S.'s unilateral trade policies. The United States cannot expect to win a trade war by alienating its allies and undermining the rules-based global trading system. Cooperation and dialogue are essential to resolving these complex trade issues and maintaining global economic stability. Section 6. The price of protectionism, impact on American consumers. While the Trump administration insists that China will be the one footing the bill for these tariffs, the reality is far more complicated. The tariffs, which are essentially taxes on imported goods, are initially paid by the companies that bring these goods into the United States. However, these companies often pass these additional costs onto consumers in the form of higher prices. In fact, it's American consumers and businesses who are likely to bear the brunt of the pain. When the cost of goods rises, it affects everyone, but it hits some groups harder than others. Families already struggling to make ends meet will find it even more challenging to afford everyday items. The tariffs will increase the cost of imported goods, leading to higher prices for everything from clothing and electronics to cars and building materials. This means that the price tags on many of the items we use daily will go up, making it more expensive to maintain the same standard of living. This will hit low and middle-income families particularly hard, as they spend a larger proportion of their income on consumer goods. For these families, even a small increase in prices can have a significant impact on their overall budget, forcing them to make tough choices about what they can and cannot afford. And let's not forget about American businesses, many of which rely on Chinese imports for components and raw materials. These businesses will now face higher costs for the materials they need to produce their goods. This can lead to a ripple effect throughout the economy. These businesses will now face higher costs, which they will either have to absorb, potentially hurting their bottom line, or pass on to consumers in the form of higher prices. This could lead to reduced consumer spending, which in turn can slow down economic growth. The impact of these tariffs is far-reaching, affecting not just the prices we pay, but the overall health of the American economy. Section 7. Seeking a truce, trade talks, and legislative maneuvers. Despite the escalating tensions, there are some glimmers of hope that a full-blown trade war can be averted. The US and China have agreed to continue trade talks, although the path forward remains unclear. Meanwhile, some members of Congress, concerned about the economic fallout from the trade war, are exploring legislative options to rein in the president's tariff powers. Whether these efforts will be successful remains to be seen. The Trump administration has shown little willingness to compromise on its trade demands, and China is equally determined to stand its ground. The stakes are incredibly high, and the outcome of this trade war could have far-reaching consequences for the global economy. Section 8. The butterfly effect, wider economic implications. The ripple effects of this trade war extend far beyond the immediate impact on prices and markets. The uncertainty surrounding trade policy is already having a chilling effect on business investment and economic growth. The International Monetary Fund, for example, has downgraded its global growth forecast for 2019, citing trade tensions as a major factor. The trade war is also exacerbating existing geopolitical tensions. The US and China are increasingly at odds over a range of issues, from cybersecurity and human rights to territorial disputes in the South China Sea. The trade war is adding fuel to this fire, making it even more difficult to find common ground on these critical issues. Section 9. A world on edge. Uncertainty and the future of global trade. The trade war between the US and China is a symptom of a much larger problem, the unraveling of the rules-based global trading system that has underpinned decades of economic growth and prosperity. The Trump administration's America First approach to trade, which prioritizes bilateral deals and protectionist measures over multilateral cooperation, is undermining this system and creating a climate of uncertainty and distrust. The world is watching nervously as this trade war unfolds. The stakes are incredibly high, not just for the US and China, but for the entire global economy. The outcome of this conflict will determine whether we move towards a more open and cooperative global trading system, or whether we descend into a new era of protectionism and economic nationalism.